All right, so I had tried to record this video so many times, but you know what? I'm just gonna say fuck it and do it because I'm about to talk about my favorite topic of all times, vampires. Now, most notably, I'm gonna be like focusing on some pretty early reports of vampires from like the 15th and 16th century. And then also talk about some other things that I found that were really cool while I did my research. This is purely just like an explorative project and a project of passion. I hope to one day do the work to become an expert on vampires. At this moment, this is me building to that apparently. So let's just start by a vampire that I learned about a couple years ago, or like this is basically reports from a vampire that I learned about like a couple years ago. The first one is Pitar Blagojevic. I'm so sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. But yeah, Pitar Blagojevic was born 1662, died in 1725. Now the thing with this vampire is pretty interesting. He's known as the first reported vampires, though. There's another one that was reported before him, but I'm not sure why he's the first. Anyways, here's how the story goes. So this story takes place in this Serbian village of Kisislova. So it's in this, I believe it was within the Austrian Empire or something at the time. So Pithar was born in 1662. He was born a peasant, and by all accounts, from whatever I can find online in my resources, he was a pretty ordinary guy. So there was nothing really, I guess, special about him. That's honestly the most cases with vampires, anyways. But yeah, pretty ordinary guy led an unremarkable life until he died. He was married, he had a son, and he lived in this village that experienced a lot of food shortages and epidemics. So hungry and sick people, pretty much. He died in 1725. Shortly after he was buried, other villagers began to die. So I think there was like 9 people that died within 8 days of each other, which is really freaking crazy. That's literally more than one death per day, which for a small village is quite alarming. Now, the thing that strung these deaths together though was that each person reported that they were strangled by Pitar as if he had risen from the grave just before their death. So the rule will go, if you see him, then you would pretty much be the next to die, or you would be soon to die. Now, there is also a record of his widow saying that he would visit her after his funeral, like asking for her shoes. And you might ask why. I'm going to tell you. There is nothing else that goes into this. It was literally that's all it said. And the thing is, it's not the only weird shit that happens. He was visited by his no, he visited his son, and he demanded food. There are two ways that I have seen this go from my research. One, he asked his son for food. His son said, fuck off. And then he was like, oh, cool. And then he murdered him by drinking his blood, of course. And then the other one is he asked his son for food and his son gave it to him. But then eventually his son was like, yo, dad, you gotta fuck off. And then he drank his blood. Either way, it pretty much ends the same with his son. Now, this whole thing happening. As usual, the story of vampires go, rumor gets started, people start seeing the dead, blah blah blah. This happens, that happens, a priest gets involved. So the villagers were like, we are terrified. We need something being done. And honestly, they weren't really concerned with, the going about it the right way because they were scared beyond any kind of sense of sanity or common sense, So they requested that a local health official and a priest visit Pithar's grave and dig him up and check for signs of vampirism. So these signs included stuff like having a full beard, long fingernails, lack of decay, yada yada yada, anything that would show that this body had been undead pretty much. So this is where we meet the local health official of Ernst Frumbald. Now, Ernst Frumbald, was he was like a representative from the Austrian authorities. He was like this local health official or an administrative representative. I'm not gonna lie, I'm not exactly. It wasn't exactly clear on what this man did because every source said that he had a different freaking job, and I was like, okay, so he's somebody important in the Austrian government, right? So he has some sort of power, but apparently he was sent there on an assignment because not just because of the reportings, but also because that village was plagued with an epidemic and hunger. So he was there to kind of check it out and help out. And then we have Gradika, which is the priest that was also working with him. So they argued with Ernst Frumball that they should say, hey, you need to dig up this person's grave with the priest. And then Ernst was like, hey guys, let's think about this legally and like sane people. And he was like, you should probably get approval from the Austrian authorities before digging people's graves up based off of some recountings of, you know, people who are now dead. And they're like, nah, screw that. We need to do this now. Now, this is, of course, very, very bad because you are desecrating someone's grave. And that is just in so many ways wrong for so many reasons. But of course, uh, they insisted on going through with it, barring any approval. So when they get to the corpse, so when the priest and Frumbald get to the corpse, and they know that there was no sign of decomposition. The hair and beard had grown, that Pethar's nails were longer, and that the blood was visible from his mouth. So all of these spell to them signs of vampirism. It's like, okay, well, this body hasn't been decaying. This body has been growing hair, growing nails. This person is clearly still alive, so that means the reports are true. So the villagers saw this and they began to stake the body. Now, the thing that kind of interested me about this story was just kind of how the villagers reacted, and they started to react very violently when they saw this. So they staked the body, they chopped the head off, they burned the head. In some sources, it says that they shot him multiple times. So this dead body is just getting mutilated by these people who are scared, and they're scared and they're paranoid. Now, the interesting thing about this was that so this is a small village, and of course, everybody in the village, they kind of lived near each other, including the graveyard where the dead bodies were buried. Now, I would assume that, of course, this being a small village plagued, you would get a lot of people who are already who are already in fear, and they were already pretty sick to begin with, and paranoid, and also religious. So there's all these kinds of things that can happen when all those factors are at play, including reportings of vampires. Now here's where Trumbull kind of comes back. Now I'm still looking for his reports because I've been trying to find them, but apparently they've been like, I don't know if they've been sealed or I just don't have access to them. But I've been looking for reports because he was somebody who was assigned to this town. Like it was an actual case that he reported on. But supposedly in those reports, he said, y'all better not put my name in any of this. So these people reacted so crazy, and honestly, if we even talk about how these villagers behaved, keep me out of it. I do not want to be held responsible because that was some wild stuff. So he got there. He saw it's like the wildest thing ever. Now, I will say that this story kind of stuck out to me just because one, it was mentioned as like the first report of a vampire. As we move forward, this is not going to be true, but it technically also does count as a pretty interesting addition to the lore of vampires, especially from so long ago. Like this was not just, oh, this person's going crazy and think something. The whole village was in on it. They got official authorities on it, and there was an official way to kill a vampire. Like it just seemed like it was so much more than a superstition. It was kind of like this law of the land, which we will definitely get into later. Now, that was the story of Pithar Blagojevic, and I am going to try to pronounce his name correctly from this point moving forward. But there's another story of another vampire. If you hear paper, that's my resources. There's another story of another vampire, Jor Grando. Now, Jor Grando, he was from the region of Istria, which is now known as Croatia, and in the small town of Kringa. Now, legend has it that Jurgrando died of an illness in 1656. He was born in 1579. So pretty much he was born, well, he died, what, like 6 short years before Petar Blagojevic died. So, I mean, sorry, before he was born. So pretty much like these are pretty much like they happen pretty close in time. But anyways, so he died in 1656, and then he hunted the small town of Kringa for 16 years. Now, this person also typical was a normal guy. He was from a region in Istria. He worked as a stonemason, and he had 2 children and a wife. That was pretty much it. We don't really know how he died of mysterious causes. I looked it up. I couldn't find anything. But he was buried in the Kringa cemetery. Fun fact, you can still go to his grave, even today in Croatia. So this lore has it that he rose every night tormenting the village, and anyone who heard a knock on their door that night was said to have died not long after. So again, this is the same kind of story with Pitar, where it was the person would see or claim to see the vampire or the figure, the human, shortly before they died. Like there are always reports of, oh, I saw this person and then I died. So that kind of even it's actually pretty cool because it sort of cements vampires, at least in myth, as this kind of omen for death. So anyone who was to see a vampire or to see some kind of undead figure, that was an omen for, hey, you're gonna die soon. So that's kind of how it would go. He would knock on their door. If the knock was heard, then they died not long after. Now, the village priest, Giorgio, he was the one who buried Grando and would also be the one to keep his undead corpse at bay as long as he could. So he was kind of this protector of this small village, keeping away vampires. Now, again, this is interesting because these people are reacting to vampires as if they're like bear attacks or like a bug infestation. Like they're not reacting as you would normally see in movies or shows where people are like, wait, that's not true. I don't believe it. This and that. How can that be? It's so usually in shows and movies these days, people go through this cycle, not cycle, but this phase of denial. They would deny what they saw because there's no way this could be happening. It seems like these 2 stories, people jump right into action, and they're not just jumping into action, they're prepared to deal with this particular kind of threat, and these preparations seem pretty effective. Um, so now it was kind of this story is kind of like really wild because like he would haunt them for 16 years, and also it's reported that he would visit his widow. So he had a wife and 2 children. The 2 kids, I believe, left the village not long after he died, but the wife was still there. So he would visit his widow Ivana, and he would pretty much sexually assault her. He would basically be performing his husband duties and would force himself upon her nightly, which is really, really messed up and insane. Now there's this so the priest Giorgio referred to him as a strigon, which in Venetian means sorcerer. And so this detail that is emphasized about him, though, everybody who saw him commented on the smile. That's what I was seeing as I was reading, that the smile on his face and how it looked like he was gasping for breath. So it was like this exaggerated, big, teethy smile that went from ear to ear, and it was so grotesque and unhuman like. But Here is actually the really cool part about this, and this is kind of why I like the story. This pretty much is the first story that had actual vampire hunters. So these nine men, these nine men were so brave. They're like, we need to stand up to this vampire, and they sought to end the terror by going to his grave with the intention of killing the evil spirit that was haunting their village. They brought a hawthorn stake, crucifixes, and other common anti-vampire things. They were the first vampire hunters to ever be recorded because they didn't just visit his grave once because it didn't work the first time. So like the stakes kept bouncing off of him. But then they kept going back, and after failed attempts, they decapitated him. So one man was named Stepan Milasik, decapitated him, which apparently that is kind of it brought peace to the world. And honestly, that's pretty much how the story goes. When it comes to vampires, they pretty much start the same way. They start with a man who died of mysterious cause, usually in a village plagued by some kind of sickness. And then it starts by reports of people who were soon to die that saw this man before they died, which got this whole lore started about him. And when that spreads wide enough, priests get involved, go to the grave, stake, or decapitation. That usually is how these vampire stories have gone. I really love stories revolving around vampires, and there is so much more that I found in my research, but it was too much to share in one video, let alone my first video. So I'll be putting those stories in other videos because the one weird thing about research is the more you learn, the more you want to know. So until next time, this is the end of my story now.